All right, today we're pulling back the curtain on what looks, on the surface, like just an ordinary dinner party in the Gospel of Luke. But as we're about to see, this single meal becomes the stage for a quiet but powerful revolution, a challenge to social and ethical norms that honestly still resonates in a big way today.
It really all boils down to this one question. What if a dinner party could actually change the world? I know, it sounds a little dramatic, right? But this story suggests that sometimes the most world-changing ideas get served up right there at the dinner table.
Okay, so first things first, we've got to get our heads into the first century world. See, a meal back then wasn't just about food, it was a high-stakes social event. This was where reputations were made or totally destroyed. And the engine driving absolutely everything was this idea of an honor/shame culture. This wasn't just about feeling good or bad about yourself, this was the social currency of the day. Every single thing you did in public was about gaining honor and, just as importantly, avoiding public shame at all costs. If you get this one concept, the rest of the story just clicks into place. So, with that in mind, every banquet ran on 3 big unwritten rules. First, your seat was basically a public billboard advertising your social status. Second, the guest list? Super exclusive. It was for the in-group only. And third, hospitality was a transaction. You invite me, I owe you one back. An invitation created a social debt. Now keep those 3 rules in your head, because Jesus is about to walk in and shatter every single one of them.
So how does he do it? Well, before Jesus even says a word about the rules of hospitality, he breaks them with one single dramatic action. Let's just paint the picture here. It's the Sabbath. Jesus is the guest of honor at the home of a big-shot Pharisee, and he's surrounded by religious lawyers and experts. The text literally says they were watching him carefully. You can just feel the tension in the room. This is not a friendly meal. It's a test.
And right in the middle of all that scrutiny, Jesus makes his move. He heals a man with dropsy, a condition that was seen as ritually unclean. So in one fell swoop, he brings someone unclean into this supposedly pure space, and he performs what they considered work by healing him on the Sabbath. He breaks 2 huge rules right in front of the people who enforce the rules. And when he's met with their silent judgment, Jesus hits them with this question about the ox. He completely turns the tables by appealing to their own common sense, their own logic. He basically exposes this glaring inconsistency in their piety, and it silences them. The text says they had absolutely nothing to say back. Okay, so now the room is silent. He's got their full attention. And with the stage set by his actions, Jesus moves on to his teaching. He takes direct aim at the very structure of the banquet and the social system it represented. He starts with the seating chart. He noticed how all the guests were scrambling for the best seats. The world's logic is pretty simple. Grab the best spot you can to show how important you are. But Jesus just flips that completely upside down. He says the logic of God's kingdom is to choose humility, to take the lowest seat. Why? Because it's so much better to be publicly honored by the host than to be publicly shamed and demoted. This isn't just about good manners. He's completely redefining how you get honor.
And then he turns to the host himself and lays down an even more radical challenge. See, society's rules say you invite people who can pay you back, your friends, your family, your rich neighbors. It's a closed loop. But Jesus says the kingdom's rules are to intentionally break that loop. Invite the people who can never repay you. The poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind. This is a direct attack on the entire social and economic system of their day.
You can just imagine how stunning this teaching was. And then, in response to something another guest says, Jesus tells a story, a parable, to kind of blow this idea up onto a divine scale.
So, what happens is another guest, probably trying to sound all pious and religious, pipes up and says, "Blessed is everyone who will eat bread in the kingdom of God." This guy clearly thinks he's got a reserved seat at that heavenly table. Well, the story Jesus is about to tell is going to put a pretty big question mark on that assumption.
The parable plays out in 4 quick stages. First, the host invites the A-listers, the elite. Second, they all start making excuses. And their excuses are all about their stuff and their relationships, land, oxen, a new marriage. Third, the host gets angry and tells his servant to forget them and go bring in the city's outcasts, the exact same people Jesus just mentioned. And fourth, when there's still more room, the invitation goes out even wider, to people on the highways, people who would never in a million years think they were welcome.
The message here is impossible to miss. The invitation to God's kingdom is for everyone, especially the people society shoves to the side. But, and this is the big twist, the insiders, the ones who thought their names were at the top of the list, might just be the ones to miss out, because they're too caught up in the very things their world values most: possessions, status, and relationships. And that all leads to the final, and frankly the most demanding part of this whole dinner conversation. If this is the kingdom, and this is the radical invitation, what does it actually cost to say yes? The answer, it turns out, is everything.
Jesus turns to the crowds following him and uses some really shocking language. He says that to be his disciple, you have to hate your family and even your own life. Whoa. Now, this isn't about emotional contempt. In that cultural context, to hate something was an idiom. It meant a radical reordering of your priorities. It meant that your number one loyalty had to shift away from your family, the absolute bedrock of their society, and be placed firmly on the mission of the kingdom. And to make sure everybody gets just how serious this is, he gives two quick analogies. First, he says, no wise person starts building a tower without first sitting down to calculate if they have enough money to actually finish it, because to start something and fail is to become a laughingstock.
The second analogy is even more serious. A king doesn't march off to war without first figuring out if his army is strong enough to win. If it's not, he tries to make peace. The stakes here are literally life and death.
The message behind both of these little stories is crystal clear, and it's powerful. Count the cost. This isn't a casual decision you just wander into. Following this path demands that you look ahead and truly understand the massive commitment it requires.
And then he just lays it all out on the table. This is the final bill. This is the cost. It's not a percentage. It's not a portion. He says, to be my disciple, you have to renounce all that you have. It's a statement of total, unconditional commitment.
He wraps it all up with one final image: salt that's lost its saltiness. It's useless. It's good for nothing but to be thrown out. And that's his final word on the subject. A half-hearted commitment, one that tries to keep a foot in both worlds, is ultimately worthless.
So what do we take away from this revolutionary dinner party? I think it boils down to four huge ideas. 1, true honor is found in humility, not in grabbing the spotlight. 2, real hospitality means swinging the doors wide open for the marginalized. 3, true discipleship is going to cost you. It demands a total reordering of your priorities. And 4, the call of the kingdom basically makes every other claim on your life, your family, your wealth, your status, secondary.
And all of that leaves us with one last really challenging question, because this isn't just some ancient story. The invitation is still open. So the question for us is, if you received this invitation today, what would you have to count? What possessions, what loyalties would you have to be willing to renounce to truly accept